Welcome back to yet another episode of Vinyl Tales, where we spin tales about vinyl. Today's song was written and inspired by a guy who had a friend that was just given an unfortunate name. It first appeared on a live album, but it was actually unplanned, and not even the band had backing music for the song yet. That spontaneous performance of this song, which he had only acquired a very short time beforehand, he didn't even have enough time to learn the lyrics for this song yet. The song ended up becoming a bigger hit than the album's title track that it was released on initially. When it was released, it was censored in multiple ways due to some of the language that was used. However, the version that's popular is not the only version out there. The writer released his own version of the song at about the same time, and his didn't have any of that profanity in it at all, unlike the popular version done by the artist that I'm choosing today. It's a song that you all know the name of. You've heard the name at least once or twice. It has connections to that great Christmas movie, A Christmas Story. And just like quite a few of these kind of songs that I've been doing, as I've discovered, it also has a sequel that you most likely haven't heard of. However, for today's song, we got to go back a little bit to kind of the beginning of this artist's career in music altogether. So, hang on to your hats, stick around, and we'll get into today's episode of Vinyl Tales. Okay, so if you've missed the last couple of episodes, I have an announcement for you. This one as a refresher if you have seen the last couple of episodes. Due to a lack of interest in this show that has been shown, or I guess technically not shown, I am considering ending this show. If you like these stories and you like this show and would like to see it continue, let me know. Message me down in the comments section. Otherwise, due to a lack of interest that has been shown for this channel, I'm considering ending it. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into today's episode. Today's story begins on July 7th, 1950. An 18-year-old man joined the Air Force. After he made it through basic training, he was eventually assigned to the United States Air Force Security Service, the USAFSS. Yeah, that's kind of a long name. He got stationed in West Germany as a Morse code operator, and his task was to intercept Soviet Union transmissions and decode them. It's said that he was actually the first person to hear about Joseph Stalin's death while listening to those Morse code transmissions. He was discharged from the military in the summer of 1954. A year earlier, in 1953, he and his unit watched the 1951 film by Crane Wilbur titled Inside the Walls of Folsom Prison. After having watched this film, it inspired him to write a song. This song would reflect his perception on prison life. Kind of like his own little view on prison life based heavily on what he had just seen from that movie. This resulted in the creation of the song Folsom Prison Blues. He would release this song a couple years later on December 15th, 1955, as his second overall single, and then again a couple years later in 1957 on his debut album, Johnny Cash with his Hot and Blue Guitar on Sun Records. After its release, this song became quite popular among inmates. They would consistently write to Johnny Cash from their prison cells and request for Johnny to come in and do a live performance right there at their prisons. He got so many requests for this that eventually in 1957 he went ahead and he held his first prison performance at Huntsville State Prison in 1957. He got quite the favorable reaction by the inmates that were there, and he thought he'd do it again. It went over well the first time, so why not do it again? And he would go on to do many, many more prison concerts over the next 10 years or so. After he had gained tremendous commercial success through his music, in the mid 1960s, Johnny Cash would develop a drug problem. His popularity even reflected this, as he would develop an increasing dependence on drugs. His popularity would decrease quite drastically, and he was just doing worse and worse as the years went by. By 1967, his drug problem had reached its peak, and Cash finally decided that he was going to seek out some help. By the end of the year, he was finally getting clean, and as a result, he was able to start turning his plummeting music career around and started doing much better on the charts. At about the same time, though, the country portion of Columbia Records, which he was signed to by this time, was going through some changes of their own. The people that had been responsible for many of Cash's albums up to this point, through his time with Columbia, were actually replaced by Bob Johnston instead. Bob was known for his erratic behavior, as well as the fact that he just didn't really get along very well with the executives at Columbia. So he wasn't afraid to tell them no. With this new producer at his side, Johnny saw an opportunity to pitch this new idea that he had had. Cash, referring to the reception he'd gotten from his past performances, wanted to try and record a live album, but from inside the prison. Johnston supported this unusual idea rather enthusiastically. The first two prisons that Johnston contacted to see about doing this little idea of theirs were San Quentin and Folsom, the place that he wrote that famous song about. Folsom Prison was actually the first one of the two to respond. After having gotten the green light from Folsom Prison, Johnny Cash and his crew went over and got things all set up and ready to go. And on January 13th, 1968, they performed two performances, just in case that first one wasn't quite good enough for their live album recording. The first one was shortly after breakfast, and then they did another one about the end of lunchtime on the same day. Only 4 months later, in May of 1968, the album At Folsom Prison was released. At this point in time, Columbia was really more focused on promoting their pop stars and weren't really too big on their country side of things. So, as far as the single off of this album and the album itself, they didn't really invest much of anything into it. But even so, this album still made it onto the charts after having had troubles for the last few years. This album was the one that was able to finally revitalize Johnny Cash's career. The success of this album even caused Sun Records, which he was originally signed to back in the 50s, to redub some of Cash's singles with them, which also made it onto the charts as well. After this album's success, they wanted to go ahead and do another one at a different prison. So, when San Quentin finally responded, they had that second chance. And Johnny Cash would head on over to do another performance at a prison, but at San Quentin this time, on February 24th, 1969. For this one, however, they did a little more. They brought over a TV crew from the UK, and they had this TV crew record the concert for a TV documentary as well. Since they were recording this performance for another live album, some of the songs that he sang were cut from the final album simply due to timing limitations. They didn't have enough space for everything on the album. A couple of the songs that were cut were Jackson and Orange Blossom Special. This being the case, they still included two versions of the song San Quentin, not just the one. They did two versions of that song, but they also included a song that they hadn't originally planned to do, and no one even saw the start coming until Johnny started singing. Before the performance, they had already decided for Johnny Cash to sing the song San Quentin twice, since it was supposed to be the major song of the set. It's at San Quentin. The album was called At San Quentin, so San Quentin was supposed to be the big deal song for the whole thing. However, on the record, it's made to appear as if it's performed as an encore due to popular demand by the audience, just like a normal encore would be. However, Bob Johnston, Cash's producer, would later choose to include both versions of the song on the album, the original performance and then that encore performance as well. But as major a song to the set as San Quentin was supposed to be, it was actually overshadowed by another song that wasn't entirely planned. You see, not too long before the San Quentin performance, Cash attended what was called a guitar pull. At a guitar pull, musicians there in Nashville would gather around and they just pass around the guitar and play their songs. It was one of their few ways for artists to have some off-hours fun there in Nashville, since it's just such a busy life. At this guitar pull, Johnny Cash met a guy named Shel Silverstein. Silverstein had written a new song, and he played it for everyone at this guitar pull. After hearing it, Johnny's wife, June Carter, liked the song and thought that it would be a good one for him to perform. So they coordinated things, and Shortly after this event that they were all at, Johnny Cash and June were going to leave for San Quentin for that live performance. When they left for San Quentin, June suggested that Johnny bring Silverstein's song along with him. Now, he had only had the song for a short while, and so he only got the chance to read over the song a couple of times before the concert. Even so, he decided to go ahead and perform the song anyway. Since he hadn't had the song for very long, he didn't quite know the words yet. So if you watch that recorded TV documentary and you watch Johnny Cash during this song, he can be regularly seen referring to a piece of paper or a lyric sheet for the lyrics of this song as he sings it. This song was entirely spontaneous. Neither that British TV crew that was filming the concert nor the backing band knew about Cash's intention to play this song. This being the case, Johnny Cash's backing band, the Tennessee Two, had to improvise the music right there on the spot with no rehearsal. And so while San Quentin was supposed to be the significant new song from both the concert and its corresponding album released, seen from the two performances of the song included on the album, the very rough, very spontaneous performance of A Boy Named Sue with sparse accompaniment from the band made this song a much bigger hit with the audience. And the charts would later reflect that as well. Released as the only single from the 1969 live album, At San Quentin, Johnny Cash released today's song, A Boy Named Sue. It was released as the A-side instead of the intended major hit from the concert, San Quentin, which was flipped and put on the B-side, due to the greater reception for A Boy Named Sue. It came out on July 2nd, 1969, about a couple weeks after the album itself did, and it became one of his biggest hits. It was his only top 10 single on the Billboard Hot 100, climbing up to number 2. It was kept from spot number 1 by Honky Tonk Women by the Rolling Stones. Aside from the Hot 100, there were 3 other charts that it made it up to the top spot of, besides that one, for 4 charts total where it made it up to spot 1 or 2. And only 6 weeks after its initial release as a single, it was certified gold. Even though this song was made famous by Johnny Cash, though, that original writer of the song, Shel Silverstein, also released it himself in 1969 as Boy Named Sue. He dropped the A on the front. He released it as both a single and as a track on his album titled Boy Named Sue and His Other Country Songs. As far as the inspiration for this song goes, there are 2 people that are linked to the inspiration for A Boy Named Sue. The first one is an attorney from a legal case that was staged in order to bring publicity to a small town. And the other person that is thought of as the inspiration for this song was simply a friend of Silverstein's. The first person is a male attorney from Madisonville, Tennessee. His name was Sue K. Hicks. Hicks was the prosecutor for a trial that took place in July of 1925. It was July 10th through July 21st of 1925. It was the state of Tennessee versus John Scopes, and it has since been come to be known as the Scopes trial or the Scopes monkey trial. In this trial, John Scopes was accused of violating what was known as the Tennessee's Butler Act. This Butler Act made it illegal for teachers to teach evolution in any state-funded school. Scopes himself was entirely unsure if he had ever taught evolution, but he had incriminated himself so that the case could have a defendant, since the entire trial was basically nothing more than a big show to bring publicity to the small town of Dayton, Tennessee, which it took place in. He was found guilty, but later he got off of it due to a technicality. The other person that the song was inspired by is the storyteller and humorist Gene Shepherd. You may know him from the 1983 film A Christmas Story, in which he is the narrator for. Gene Shepherd was a humorist like Silverstein, but because of his girly sounding name, he was taunted and bullied quite a bit as a kid. Thus, Gene, being the girly name for the inspiration of the song, and the guy actually named Sue, well, there's your name for it. But if you like this song, then you probably know that it has a sequel, right? You didn't? I'm not surprised. Well, in 1978, Shel Silverstein wrote a follow-up for A Boy Named Sue. This follow-up song is called The Father of a Boy Named Sue, and he released it on his album called Songs and Stories. This sequel song, or follow-up song, whichever you want to refer to it as, tells the story of a boy named Sue, but he tells it from the old man's point of view instead. So A Boy Named Sue is told from the point of view of the boy named Sue, and the follow-up song from 78 is told from his dad's point of view. Even though there have been various covers of this follow-up song done throughout the years, the only recording done by a major artist, at least on public record that I was able to find anyway, the only recording done by a major artist of this follow-up song is the one done by Silverstein himself. And that's all I got for you today. If you like this story, or you got other more cool stories or interesting facts about songs or albums, let me know and I will look into them. They may even appear in a future episode. And like I said earlier in the video, as well as in the past two, due to a lack of interest that has been shown to me in this show, in this channel, I am considering ending the show because it's just not worth the effort to make these episodes if no one's going to watch them, if no one's going to interact with them. If you like this show and you like this stuff and you would like to see the channel continue, the show keep going, let me know, as well as if you've got other cool stories. I love finding these things out. In the meantime, do all that fun stuff like, comment, subscribe. My name is Brandon. This has been Vinyl Tales, where we spin tales about vinyl, and I will see you later.